Claude Michael Sylvah, which you've all just seen his picture go around, and there's another picture coming around right now of the crew, and I'll mention a little bit more about that picture in a few minutes. But Claude is the gentleman right here at the top of this picture. Claude Michael Sylvah, the son of Thomas Sylvah and Anna McCann, was born on July 21st, 1911 in Smiths Falls, Ontario. Claude completed 3 years of high school at the Smith Falls Collegiate Institute, leaving school to work as a car checker for the CPR Railway, which, as we learned just the other day, Smith Falls was a big railway town. Then he worked as an employee and eventually assistant manager of a local restaurant, which was called the Candy Kitchen. So he worked there between 1930 and 1933, and then he bought the Candy Kitchen from the owner in 1933 and ran the establishment until his enlistment in May of 1942. Claude had also been engaged just prior to his enlistment, but for reasons unknown, the engagement was canceled, and Claude soon after signed up to join the RCAF. At the time of his enlistment, Claude's older brother, Art, who was Paul's father, who we just heard about, was serving with the Royal Air Force in North Africa. Claude began training as a wireless operator, but according to his service record, failed to attain the required score in Morse code and procedures and was reselected to Air Gunnery School. In June of 1943, he received his Air Gunner's badge and embarked for the UK from Halifax later that month. After moving through a few operational training units and conversion units, he was posted to the 405 Vancouver RCAF Squadron in September and would stay with the squadron throughout his time in the RCAF, where he was commissioned to the rank of Flight Sergeant on the 23rd of February 1944. Claude's crew would fly their first mission together, minus Gordon Knupp, who would join the crew 2 missions later on October 23, 1943, to Leipzig, Germany. The crew consisted of 2 Australians, pilot Bill Chase and bomber William Sinclair, 3 Brits, tail gunner Ron Daniels, flight engineer James Matthew Buckley, and wireless operator Jack Gill, and 2 Canadians, navigator Gordon Knupp and mid-upper air gunner Claude Sylvah. They would fly another 28 missions together, including 10 over Berlin, Germany, in varying roles. Normally, a tour of duty for an RCAF airman would be 30 trips, followed by a likely reassignment to an instructor position to train with new crews. The 405, however, was the only Canadian squadron that was part of the elite RAF No. 8 Pathfinder Group, based out of Granson Lodge Air Base, whose main task was to provide illuminated marking of identified mission targets. As such, they would fly ahead of the main bomber stream and drop colored incendiary markers for the trailing bombers to aim their respective bomb loads on. It was a fitting job for a squadron whose motto was Ducimus, or in English, we lead. Pathfinder crews were required to serve a 45 to 50 mission tour, and more often than not found themselves stirring up the hornet's nest, being the first ones over the target, having to confront the barrage of German anti-aircraft fire, as well as fresh and hungry Luftwaffe night fighter crews night after night. Though all RAF and RCAF air crew entered the service as volunteers, crews of the PFF, which was the Pathfinder Force, were selected based on their competency as well as experience and received specialized training for this very specific role. They were, quite simply, among the best of the best. On the night of May 8th, 9th, 1944, the PFF crews of 405 Squadron were tasked with marking the main target of the night, the rail yards at Han-Saint-Pierre, France. It is Belgium, I'm sorry. Less than 1 month from the D-Day landings in Normandy, their mission, along with others, served first the purpose of supporting the belief by the German OKL High Command that an invasion would take place in the Pas-de-Calais, and secondly, and probably more importantly, was to disrupt all of the communication and transportation lines that could be used to support and bolster the German forces in Normandy, where the invasion was actually going to take place. This would be the only raid that would take place on Han-Saint-Pierre throughout the war. Claude's crew boarded Lancaster ND 587. Also, all planes had a three-digit, three-letter code. Theirs was LQD, the D standing for D-Dog. That night, a plane that they had flown all of their missions in since late December 1943, for a total of 2 completed sorties in that plane, and reported wheels up at exactly 2 a.m. A total of 123 planes took part in the raid from 6 Group, 8 Group, and 100 Operational Support Group. A total of 8 other planes would not return from that mission. 3 Lancasters, 6 Halifaxes, all crashing in Belgium. 2 of the 9 lost planes would come from 405 Squadron. The results of the raid that night on Han Saint-Pierre proved successful, with significant damage done to the railway facilities. Aerial photographs and battle assessments that I was able to consult at the Library Archives Canada, taken on May 9th, show a huge plume of smoke rising up over the rail yards and the southern part of the town. LQD ND 587 was claimed by 2 different German night fighter pilots, as Robert had mentioned that night, both from the same squadron. First was Conrad Bayer, who claimed the victory at 3:37 a.m., one of 5 total claims that he made that night. 8 minutes later, Wolfgang Marstaller claimed victory as well. And he claimed it at actually a higher elevation than Bayer did, which leads to some questions, because if Bayer had first attacked them and had injured the plane, it's strange that it would climb up to a higher elevation, but that was what he claimed. In the end, both pilots were awarded the claim. During Marstaller's attack on D-Dog, the crew fired a flare, alerting friendly fighters that they were in need of assistance. And I haven't figured out if that was common practice or not for crews. A Mosquito from 100 Group, piloted by flying officers Woodman and Kennis, engaged the German night fighter, culminating in a low-level dogfight just feet above the ground. Though they returned fire against the Mosquito, Marstaller's Bf-110 sustained significant damage and crash-landed in a field, injuring 2 of his crew. Marstaller recounted the events of the night in a letter that he wrote home to his parents, which confirm many details of the attack, and I'll read a little bit of that letter just in a minute. After landing in the field, he writes that the crew witnessed an impact about 2 miles away, which they concluded the next day was the impact of Claude's crew. For downing ND 587, Marstaller would be awarded the Iron Cross, 2nd class, along with another medal. It would be his only confirmed kill of the war. He died later on August 18, 1944, when he attempted another emergency landing, killing himself and another crew member, while the 3rd escaped while being ejected from the plane on impact. Wolfgang Marstaller was 20 years old. Witnesses of the crash of D-Dog told that the plane was in flames before it crashed and actually broke into pieces before impact. 2 bodies of the crew were eventually identified, Claude and rear gunner Ron Daniels, and their identification was probably most likely due to the way that the plane broke apart and where they were located on the plane. The intense fire from the crash burned through the night. The Germans posted guards around the crash site, and the fire subsided by the morning. Due to oil and fluids from the crash seeping into the ground, as Robert mentioned earlier, it took 20 years for any sort of crops to grow out of that area where they landed. Marstaller, in a letter written home to his parents and dated May 12th, describes the night's events. A lot has happened these past days. I think of my short visit with you very long ago. You will think more about this Sunday as I do. The return voyage home was problematical. As we arrived in Jena at midday, there was an alarm, but that didn't disturb us. At dusk, we returned to our base where we arrived at 10 o'clock. We had to eat in a hurry as the Tommies were coming. At first, nothing happened, but at 3 o'clock, we had to take off. It was very light this night, so we could see the Tommies in great numbers. My crew had seen at least 10, but we could catch only 1. As I came near enough and took a shot, if only the muzzle flash wouldn't blind so much, the swine fired a flare, and an enemy night fighter arrived promptly. I couldn't continue my attack and had to flee from the fast Mosquito. It came after me, however, and wouldn't let go. At low level, at night, about 3 feet off the ground, we shot at each other. After we gave him one and he flew off, I had to make an emergency landing as we had taken damage. I found a suitable field and nothing went wrong during the landing. He ends his letter to the family, "Things will be as they must, and that is good. I am certainly not careless." The bodies of the crew of ND 587 would be buried together in a mass grave in Sqdn, Belgium, where the Luftwaffe headquarters for the region were located. Following the war, local residents Gilberte Tilly and her mother of Sqdn tended the graves of Claude's crew, along with one other Squadron 405 member that was shot down that same night. And the family continued to stay in contact with with several of the crew's families after the war. During the war, Gilberte had been arrested and sentenced to death by the Germans for resistance activities and was transferred to Ravensbrück concentration camp, where she stayed until liberation by the Russian army. In 2008, evacuation of this crash site resulted in a number of parts of the plane being recovered, including a 6-foot section of propeller. The following year, the propeller was repatriated to Canada and is currently on display in the 405 Squadron Air Museum in Greenwood, Nova Scotia. What is truly fascinating about the crash of ND 587 to me is the connection that the surviving family members have and that they've developed. In order to put this biography together of Claude Sylvah and the events surrounding what happened on May 8th, 9th, 1944, I really didn't have to do a whole lot. They had done a lot of the work, and Robert had done a lot of the work too. Though Claude Sylvah would not return home from overseas, his brother Art would. Paul Sylvah, who we've heard about already, Claude's nephew and Art's son, lives in Burlington, Ontario, and began his journey of learning about Claude's life when he received the signet ring that he had given to his fiancée before he signed up to the RCAF. She returned the ring to the family, and the ring was given to Paul. And really, his family didn't know a whole lot about anything, so he started to piece this together. Sinclair's family, as Robert had mentioned, had been doing the same. And so they had all been trying to piece these things together. Paul is a supporter of the Hamilton Canadian Warplane Museum that is located at the Hamilton Airport, where one of only 2 airworthy Lancasters in the world is located. The picture of the crew was actually taken in front of the first Canadian Lancaster, KD 700, that was built in Canada. And that plane served in the 405 Squadron for 2 missions. They never flew in it, but that was taken in front of that plane. And the Lancaster that's in Hamilton actually has the Ruhr Express name on it, which is the name of that plane. In 2016, Paul took a ride in VRA, which is Vera, the Lancaster that's in Hamilton, dedicating the flight to his Uncle Claude. Beginning around 2007, the families of the crew began communicating and sharing details of their research and with each other, culminating in a group visit to this site in 2014, including, as Robert had mentioned, a flyby by the Belgian Air Force training jets, which I can only imagine how touching and emotional that was for everybody. Over 25 family members and friends were here in 2014, fulfilling a promise by all to never forget the lives of these 7 men who they have all affectionately refer to as our crew. And you can see that on that picture. All the families have kind of adopted those 7 boys as one of theirs. Like many of the places that we visited throughout this tour, for the land and the people of France and Belgium, the memory of these wars live on. The events that took place over 70 and 100 years ago still resonate in these places. They are seen in the rolling fields that every year bring to surface their iron harvest. They are present in the bomb and gun damage still seen and visible in towns and cities across Europe. And they still live on in the shared memories of the locals in their communities. Robert's work here in Galliax, the care of the Tilly family to tend to the graves of the 7 boys from across the Atlantic Ocean in Sqdn, and the people of Givenchy en Gaule declaring 2017 as the year of Canada are all proof to that. they also continue to live on outside of these places as we, educators and students, continue to learn about and share their stories with others. To end this, I knew we weren't going to get a flyby by the Belgian Air Force, but what I would like to do is play the sound of a Lancaster bomber flying over. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the one from Hamilton or the one from England to come fly over us today, so this is the closest that I could get. Hopefully, you can all hear it.